All right, so tonight we continue in our journey of John chapter 7, and we have made it to chapter 7, and we've walked, like I said, I don't know how long we're going to be here, but it feels like we've been here a while, but I think God's shown us some awesome things as we walked through this book of John. And so as we saw last week, we had the story in chapter 6, we had the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus went across the sea, he walks on water, goes into a synagogue, and gives a whole discourse on his phrase of, I am the bread of life. And then he makes these like cannibalistic claims that if you want to be and receive this bread of life, you need to drink my blood and eat my flesh. You need to actually partake of my life. I have come. You keep wanting me to give you manna. You keep wanting me to prove who I am by sending down manna like Moses did. And he keeps just repeating, no, you're missing the point. It's me. I am the bread of life. I'm the manna that's coming down from heaven. And so he gives this whole discourse, he gives this truth to some 6,000 people. And then we see with last week's sermon, that there was just some people that couldn't handle it. They literally looked at Jesus and said, what you're asking me is too much, and I'm going to leave now. I'm going to stop following you. And so we looked at some characteristics as we went through those verses in the end, 60 through 71 of chapter 6, of really some characteristics of those who sometimes drop out of faith, or what happens to people who ghost the church, right? Like we just wonder where people went. We looked at some 4 characteristics of those people. And so tonight, we are actually fast forwarding 6 months in Jesus' life. If you want to know what happened in those 6 months, read the other 3 Gospels. They fill in what John does not. So where John says after this, he's really recapping 6 months in 2 words, after this. And so you don't really know what this after this is. Just go read Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They do depict what Jesus is doing in that time period between the teachings in the synagogue. And now we meet Jesus' family. Maybe you guys are smarter than I am. I did not realize Jesus had so many siblings. He had 4 brothers, and they believe 2 sisters, and he might have had a couple more, but the sisters aren't mentioned in Scripture. The 4 brothers actually are. And so tonight we look up in John 7 in verse 1. After this, so after a 6-month time period, Jesus traveled around Galilee. He wanted to stay out of Judea, and this is key. He wanted to stay out of Judea where the Jewish leaders were plotting his death. If you remember back when we started chapter 5, I said, now people are trying to kill Jesus. After the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda and breaking the law on the Sabbath, these religious leaders are now out for blood. They are now out to kill Jesus. Jesus knows this. And he says, well, the Jewish leaders were plotting his death. But soon, it was time for the Jewish festival of shelters. And Jesus' brothers said to him, leave here and go to Judea, where your followers can see your miracles. You can't become famous if you hide like this. If you can do such wonderful things, show yourself to the world. In verse 5, for even his brothers didn't believe in him. Tonight, if you've ever asked the question, is Jesus really is who he says he is? You're not alone. His brothers asked the same question. If you ever really had a point in your life, you're like, man, Jesus, if you are who you say you are, is this Jesus thing for real? Right? You come to a point where like, is this for real? You're not the only one that's come through that question and on the other side of it. And so what's interesting is it says that Jesus is, in the front of this, it says that Jesus is brothers. There are 4 of them that are mentioned in Scripture. 2 of them, you're going to know their names. Number 1 is James. He wrote the book of James. Number 2 is Jude. He wrote the book of Jude that we have in our Bible. And then there are 2 more. There was Josie or Joses, Joses, and another one by the name of Simon. And so there's 4 brothers are coming up to Jesus. And what's amazing is they all of a sudden want to become Jesus' campaign manager. right? They poured out just a campaign strategy for Jesus to become the next Messiah and King of the Judean region. And they put out a great 4-point plan for Jesus here to really go, all right, man, you want to be this king thing? We got a plan for you, and here it is. Number 1, it's in bold here. Leave here and go to Judea. He's in Galilee right now. Nothing good comes out of Galilee. It's a small town. If you want to be known, man, it's the realtor slogan. Location, location, location. Right? How many people have wished their church was in a location like we have? How many people would say if my church was only in a better spot, then it would grow? If we only got more people to see this thing, then it would be better. Right? These mindsets are not new. There's nothing new under the sun. So these 4 brothers are saying, no, listen, leave here, you go to Judea. You need to get to in a bigger arena. But not only that, and when you leave here and go to Judea, your followers can see your miracles. You see, if you remember, which I know you all do, because I know you take diligent notes and you review them weekly and you're memorizing this book along with me. In John 3, Jesus was baptizing a ton of followers in Judea. And if you remember, John the Baptist got kind of ticked at that. His followers, his disciples, John the Baptist's disciples are saying, wait a minute, who's this Jesus guy? His line's longer than ours. What's going on here? You see, a bunch of people in Judea all of a sudden were taking hold and following Jesus. And so his disciples are saying, not only get to a bigger region, you got a bigger pool of followers. You just lost a chunk at the temple here, man. You got to get to where the people are. But not only get to where the people are, you can't become famous. You are not going to be the next king of Israel if you keep hiding like this in Israel. You keep doing this stuff in quiet, man, ain't nobody going to believe you. Ain't nobody going to see what you're going on. You got to get to where you got to get in front of people. And then their last point is you got to show yourself to the world. You got to get CNN, Fox News. You got to get them here, and you got to get that image out there. Does that sound familiar to anything that has recently happened in our world? Any of that sound any kind of familiar of we want the next person to save us? Right? His 4 brothers walked into Jesus' life, gave him the 4-point political plan, say this is what you need to do. And this is where I kind of rail just a second on just programmatic thinking in the church. If we only had this feeding ministry, then people would know who we are. I did this sermon this morning at a church, and I said I wasn't going to use this example, but I'm not going to go in depth as I did. So I made up in my sermon this morning the Widows Roofing Company, WRC. And so let's say the WRC, what we're set up to do here at the WRC is we have a heart to replace widows' roofs. That's what we have a heart to do. All right, that's our mission. That's what we want to do. And so what I did is I walked up to Pastor Bill and I said, hey, Pastor Bill, I want to roof the house, I want to roof the houses of the widows. I'm going to say this right. And so I got a heart, man. I want to do it, right? And I want to do it in the name of Journey by Grace. And I'm going to call the Trib, let them know I'm doing it. And as they come up to interview them, I'll make sure they take a shot of that sign. I'll make sure they got our address at Journey by Grace. You know, I got a heart for the widows and their roofs. So I want to make sure that Journey by Grace is known for the roofs of the widows, right? But see, that whole plan falls apart when I run out of a roof to give. Because it was based on trying to get people to Journey by Grace, not replacing the roof of a widow. Right? And a lot of times when we start ministries, we forget verse 5. We act like the 4 brothers. If we get our 4-point plan in place, we got our 4-point, we got the budget, we know what we want to do, we're going to launch into this thing. And the whole time, God's just kind of, for even his brothers didn't believe in him. It's out of a motivation of glory. It's out of a motivation to say, hey, look what we're doing. And you see, the whole problem is that breaks down when the program stops. That breaks down when the Widows Roofing Company doesn't have any more shingles because no one is giving to it anymore because the hailstorm already happened and we don't have to replace any more roofs. Right? I'm not railing on church, really how they're set up, but what I'm saying is what of our motive behind what we're doing? What is the work of the church then? If it's not to really glorify ourselves, it's not to really focus on this 4-point plan and we're going to do outreach, which all outreach is good, it needs to be done right. So what I see is this is the work of the church then. If I'm suggesting to you a poor model, let me give you a good one, right? To discover each one, the spiritual gifts God has been given to us. What is the first spiritual gift God gives to us? Salvation. First thing we need to do as the work of the church is get people to know who God is. Secondly, is to utilize the spiritual resources that are provided to us in the presence of Jesus himself in our hearts by the Spirit. So the second thing, after we figure out that we love God and we want to live for him, we're not going to be the dropouts of faith we learned about last week, that when things get tough, we're going to run. We've solidified my life in Jesus Christ. Now my next step is, okay, how am I gifted? What has God gifted me in to do? Maybe I'm really good with people and I'm good with hospitality, and that's what I'll do. Maybe I'm good at encouraging and I'm the most encouraging person ever. That gift missed me, so I'm not an encourager. Maybe I'm a teacher, right? And I can just teach in my house, or maybe I can teach others the things I'm learning in the Bible when I'm at work. There's tons of giftings here. We're not going to list all of them. So that's the second step. And then do what is right before us in our neighborhoods, in our homes, in our families, wherever we are. We're not to keep then quiet. We're not then to say, well, good thing I have Jesus and good thing he made me good at something. Too bad no one ever going to see that. It's not necessarily what the Christian life was meant to produce and how the church is supposed to be cycling spiritual giftings around, right? We're supposed to use that for the benefit of the kingdom. And then that is the way the church is to accomplish its work. And I see Jesus saying this to his brothers as we go through this story. That's why I front load this information. I front load all of this because I see this is what Jesus is explaining to these four brothers. You're wanting to do something for your glory. You want me to be king to make it so I am king and you're the brothers of a king, not that you're the brother of the Messiah. Not that you're the brother of the one who actually changes hearts and changes lives and does miracles. We want to be the brother of the guy who will give us everything. Right? It's the same thing with the feeding of the 5,000. Prove us you're real. What can you give me lately? Right? That whole vending machine God idea, the cosmic vending machine God, I'll follow if you give. That's what the brothers are looking to do here. Because in verse 5, they never believed in him. And see, the root is faith, is salvation. So I think you see that. I think you get that. So I'll stop yelling. So in John 7, he continues in verse 6. Well, this is Jesus' reply to his brothers. Well, now is not the right time for me to go. Here's where it kind of gets a little mean to them. It says, but you can go anytime. The world can't hate you, but it does hate me. And why does the world hate Jesus? Because he accuses it of doing evil. But he says to them, you go on. I'm not going to this festival because my time has not yet come. After saying these things, Jesus remained in Galilee. So my first thought in this, looking at this whole discourse, is number one, are you more like the brothers or is your worldview more like Jesus's? You see, what Jesus is saying to the brothers is they're not even going to know a difference between you and them. They're looking to kill me because everywhere I go, I'm challenging the evil that's in them. Everywhere I walk, I'm teaching against the religious establishment that's in place. Everywhere I go, I'm actually speaking truth to bring life. And because of what I'm speaking, they're looking to kill me. But you see, your life doesn't look like mine. You can go to that festival anytime you want to because they're not looking to kill you. You look way too much like them. And so, church, do we look too much like what's going on around us? Is there any difference in your worldview and how your life is set up compared to the person next to you who may not know who God is? I used to say to my youth group all the time, if you look like your friend who doesn't know God, you're doing Christianity wrong. It's just the simplest forms I can break it down to. If you look too much like the world, you're doing this wrong. That there's something haywire because it should be a huge contrast between what you're believing in and what the world is over here focused on. And so, do you want to just go on into a festival or do you want to be worried someone's going to kill you? That's my challenge. So, after saying this, Jesus remained in Galilee. And really what Jesus was saying in these three verses is we have a time frame here. As I mentioned before as we go through this, we don't have like time stamps as we go through this. I had mentioned that we're sitting in October The only reason I know that is because the Feast of the Shelters is usually in October. All right? Why I know that is because I read something this week that told me that. Okay? It's our month of October. And this Feast of the Shelters, what it represents is what Jesus is saying here to his brothers is wrong feast for me to enter Jerusalem. That's what he's saying to the four brothers. Wrong feast. You guys are right in your idea. Don't worry. I'm going. I'm not worried about the death thing. You got the wrong feast. They're 6 months shy of the Feast of the Passover. This is Feast of the Tabernacles, and what this feast does is remembers Israel of the book of Numbers. What they did was outside their house, they put together lean-tos like they would have in the wilderness, and they live in those tents or those shanties. So basically Israel and Judea, the countryside turned into shanty town for a little bit, and they lived in theirs to remember God's provision as they're going through life. You see, that meaning of a festival is way different than the Feast of the Passover. You see, Jesus knew what he was going to walk into, because if you remember from everyone going to Sunday school, what the Feast of the Passover is you put the blood on the door frame of your post, and when that blood is on your household, Jesus goes on by. You see, the blood redeems your situation. And so Jesus is looking at his four brothers and saying, you got a good idea. Everybody does need to know who I am. Everybody does need to see me, and everybody does need to experience miracles, but you're too early. And I think that's a danger too, because sometimes we get discouraged when we launch into something, and all of a sudden we hit a wall and we think, well, God, the widows need roofs. Their roofs are falling down. They ain't got no money to get their roof fixed. They need a roof. But yet our ministry fell flat. The WRC's dead in the water because there wasn't a hailstorm and we were early, right? And we pushed an idea that we wanted to promote a church before we hit the ministry where we were supposed to. This is a delicate thing. When we're entering into ministry, there's a timing. And so here's the question in your mind. Well, how do I know the right time then? I got a really, really easy answer for you. Pray about it. If it's really God's idea that he gave you, that he wants you to do, I'm pretty sure he's going to update you on the plan and give you the timing of what you need to do. He's not just going to give you the widow's roofing company and be like, good luck, man. Good luck running that. It's a solid idea, but good luck. He's not going to leave you down like that. And so we overthink sometimes launching, or we get discouraged because maybe we just jumped a little early. It doesn't mean God hates you. It doesn't mean God doesn't want the roofs on widows' houses. It doesn't mean that God has left you or forgotten you or forsaken you. It means you had a failure to launch. You just jumped too early. And so what Jesus is saying is wrong feast, guys. Wrong feast. Too early. You're too early. You got a great idea. I'm going to go in there, show everybody who I am, do my miracles, do my thing. It is who I am, but you're too early. And so verse 10. But after his brothers left for the festival, we see what Jesus really wanted to do. Jesus also went, though secretly staying out of public view. You see, the brothers wanted him to walk into Jerusalem going, look at my brother, look how awesome he is. This is Jesus. He's the guy that turned water into wine. He healed the woman at the well. He had the conversation with Nicodemus. He's the best person in the world. He's awesome. He's great. You need to believe in my brother. He's the coolest thing in the world. He's going to be the next king of Israel. And they want to charge him up. They want to give him the best campaign enthusiasm. The Jesus train is rolling into Jerusalem, right? And Jesus is saying, no, that's not what I want at all. I want to go quietly. I don't want me exalted. I want my Father in heaven exalted. I don't want people looking at me saying, oh my gosh, look, if you just believed in him, you'll have everything you want, because Jesus never promises that. But that's what the brothers wanted. The people that didn't believe in him, that's what they wanted. And so it goes on in 11 through 13. It says the Jewish leaders tried to find him at the festival. You see, the whole festival was abuzz with the talk of Jesus. The whole festival was abuzz with, oh my gosh, have you heard about the miracles that Jesus did here? Have you heard about what he did here? Did you hear about that woman at the well? She's right over there and she's here and she loves Jesus now. There's a whole talking. These verses are our climate right now. Listen to these. So the Jewish tried to find him at the festival and keep asking, has anybody seen Jesus? There was a lot of grumbling about him among the crowd. Some argued, he's a really good man. But then others said, he's nothing but a fraud who deceives the people. Does that sound like any kind of conversations you've had about maybe someone you support or do not support in today's climate? Same things happening here in Jerusalem. Who do we want to be our next king? And so, but no one had the courage to speak favorably about him in public, for they were afraid of getting in trouble with the Jewish leaders. You see, these people knew the Jewish leaders didn't like Jesus. But I'm going to show you some verses ahead that they had no idea what they were trying to kill him. These people just knew that if I was talking favorably about Jesus, I would get squashed here, right? And so in John 7:14 it goes, then midway through the festival, we see why Jesus actually went to the festival now. Jesus went up to the temple and began to teach. I feel like the word quietly is that should be after festival. Then midway through the festival, Jesus quietly went up to the temple and began to teach. The people were surprised when they heard him. How does he know so much when he hasn't been trained, they ask. So Jesus told them, my message is not my own. It comes from God who sent me. You see, I wish I had, obviously, a teaching skill of Jesus. Because everywhere he went, people just were cut to the heart to believe in who he was. And they're looking at Jesus going, man, how is this guy speaking like he is and revealing truth like he is? Isn't that Mary's boy? Listen, I knew Mary's boy. He knocked over my vineyard. Listen, I knew this guy. And now all of a sudden, he's in here telling me all about this truth that I'm confirming in myself. How is this possible? This can't be the same Jesus that we knew at 5. And he's saying, well, no, listen, point blank again. My message is not my own. It comes from God who sent me. And then in 17, anyone who wants to do the will of God. Listen, this is key to our implementation of the WRC. All right? This is key. If we want the Widows Reuben Company to succeed, all right, this is it. Anyone who wants to do the will of God will know whether my teaching is from God or is merely my own. All right, you read that and you go, what? Here's the audience. You get in your heart. Let's get back in our chair. Remember my analogy of the chair? I've set you in your chair and I've split everything from you. You don't have a job anymore. You don't have a family. You don't have a kid. You have no success that you've ever done. You have nothing. You are sitting in a chair. You've done nothing at this point. You're sitting in your chair. And something catastrophe happens and I say, okay, what do you have? You see, you're not the only person that's ever questioned, is this God thing for real? You're not the only person that's ever doubted whether Jesus was present in times of trouble. You're not the only Christian that's ever wondered, where's God? I think the deciding factor of those who walked away and those who stayed is they sat there until it was confirmed that my God is here. See, that's a huge difference. When the silence isn't speaking and I still remain, that's a huge difference than when, God's not talking, I'm out. You just take your walk. Because you know what? God hasn't said anything in years. He ain't going to start now. Well, do you really want him, or are you looking for a glory or fame to come out of what you're trying to do right now? And so I say this to say, if we are looking and seeking and we know who God is, those who want to do the will of God will know whether my teaching is from God or is merely my own. There will be a confirmation that says, this God thing's for real. I've been in situations where I've had to wait for a confirmation to know if this God thing's for real. So I challenge you, sit and wait. Don't get up and run. Don't get up and wonder. Go, God, I need you right now to tell me if this thing's real. You see, because 18 is the explanation of those who got up. Those who speak for themselves want glory only for themselves. That's the brothers. I'm speaking for myself here. Love him. Love Jesus. He's awesome. I'm speaking for me here, though. I want to be the brother of a king. But a person who seeks to honor the one who sent him speaks truth. See, if we want to honor God, for the one who sent him, meaning Jesus, speaks truth, not lies. We're not out for a gimmick. The church is never out for a gimmick. The church is never out for a program. The church is never out for anything but the gospel of Jesus Christ and promoting your life in Jesus Christ. That is what our church is grounded in, and that's what all churches need to be grounded in. It's not a gimmick and not the 12-step program to get your life happy now and the purpose-driven life and the purpose-driven church and the purpose everything. We're here to say, hey, God is what you need to be working on. So, Moses gave you the law, but none of you obey it. In fact, you are trying to kill me. And so Jesus is replying to the crowd here and saying, listen, none of you are listening to anything I've said. None of you have any idea what's going on. In fact, you're actively trying to kill me right now. And here's my clue of why the crowd had no idea. The crowd replied, you're demon-possessed. Who's trying to kill you? They literally went on the rant of, no, we understand that people are trying to kill you, man. We're sorry. We're going to follow you and help you. No, they're like, yeah, you're possessed by a demon. No one's trying to kill you here. But we realized at the beginning of this, it said the religious leaders were trying to plot and kill Jesus. See, the religious leaders didn't make their attack yet. You see, we're not in Easter yet. We're not 6 months ahead, right? We're in the Lenten season and we're gearing up of all this destruction that's about to come on Jesus' ministry, but we're just not there yet in the story. And so in 21, Jesus replied, very, very, very logical argument here. I did one miracle on the Sabbath, meaning the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda. If you recall that sermon in chapter 5, he healed that man on the Sabbath. He got in trouble for that. And it says, and you all were amazed, but you work on the Sabbath too when you obey Moses' law of circumcision. So he's saying, you're yelling at me and trying to put me to death, proclaiming I'm the Messiah for working on the Sabbath, but you guys are doing the same thing by working on the Sabbath. And he's saying, well, actually, this tradition of circumcision began with the patriarchs long before the law of Moses. For if the correct time for circumcising your son falls on the Sabbath, you go ahead and do it so as not to break the law of Moses. You guys are upkeeping a religious system to try not to break a law. Here I am as the Messiah, breaking the law to bring life to people, and you're trying to kill me. You're doing the same thing. So he says, so why should you be angry with me for healing a man on the Sabbath? Why are you mad at what I'm doing when you're doing the same thing? Makes sense, right? Calls out their hypocrisy. And verse 24, which is what I'm going to end with. You look beneath the surface so you can judge correctly. So here's my, you might be like, okay, where are we going with this? Right? You might be sitting at the end of this going, I think I followed you to this point. But what are you talking about? What's this mean? So here's where I want to end in your thinking as we go through what Jesus is doing here. Number one, it's in your life. Again, Jesus is hammering, what are we promoting? It's the first thing Jesus is hammering here. Are you the four brothers promoting a king? Or are you the followers promoting a Messiah? There's a big difference there. Come to God because he can give you, or come to God because he's changed my life. If you remember, how do we overcome? We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Your salvation and what God has done is how you overcome. No one can argue with the visible proof that God has changed you. You can argue that God's changed someone else, that God's not worked over here, but no one's going to argue when you're looking him point blank in the face and say, let me tell you what God has done for me. Not for my neighbor, not for my pastor, but for me. No one can challenge that because you're standing in front of them. They basically would have to look at you and be like, you're demon-possessed, right? Like they did to Jesus. So that's my first thing. What are we really driving at in our life? But then secondly, it's have we taken that step to say, all right, God, I'm driving at you. That's settled. I'm not walking away. Where else am I going to go, right? We've made those statements in 6. I'm not the four brothers. I'm not trying to do a political scheme here to see who my king is. I got mine. I'm good. Are you allowing that relationship to flourish to see what God wants to do through you? Basically, I'm saying, this is the dumbest analogy I'm about to say ever, and I apologize right now. I'm so sorry for what's about to come out of my mouth. Have you made your relationship Facebook official? I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But have you went from private to public? Have you went from I'm just closetly going to church. Like I said last week, if you can't muster up faith in a room that's safe, I'm sorry, it's going to be really hard to muster that up outside this room. It's going to be really hard. It's safe in here. Everyone expects you to have faith in here. It's when you leave here that it starts getting challenged. And so have you walked in your life and said, okay, I know I've resolved to do this, but does anybody else know that you've actually done that? Have you started building your families and your lives and the way your household runs off of what the Bible said, and you've actually started weeding out things that maybe weren't as healthy as I maybe did privately over here? Because when I'm privately following God, little things I do don't convict me as bad as when other people know what I should be doing, right? More eyes see you, right? And so that's the two things that I see when I go in this is, have we moved from private to public? And I don't mean that you're on a soapbox screaming, I love Jesus Christ, right? We're not wearing the WWJD bracelets, and we don't have the t-shirts on with the crosses, and we have our chest hair shaved where the cross hits so you can see it. And it's not a show kind of thing. It's a demonstrate kind of thing. My life is visibly different because I've met who Jesus Christ is. And because of that visible difference, I want to start teaching out of my home a Bible study. I want to get my people who don't know God together in my life, that you're not looking for a 12-step program for my life. It makes things so much simpler for me because now I just need to focus on what you want from my life. I know that you want my life. I know that you have my life. I know that you want to simply use me. But God, how? How and where? How and when? How? What is it that I can be doing? So Holy Spirit, would you reveal that to us? And God, if we don't know you yet, if we're in this room and we haven't even started life yet, we're just sitting there on the outside of life. Father, would you show us how to get to you? God, reveal that we need you. God, reveal that we need you in saving. So Father, thank you for truth. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Would you stand with us?